What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. So Megadeth, as I'm sure you guys already know, just put out their 16th studio record, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. And, you know, the rollout of this album, more so than the album itself, really inspired me to just fucking rip through this band's back catalog in a way that I haven't for quite some time. And then I thought to myself, like, what more perfect band for one of these deep cuts videos? I've argued this for years, and it's one of the single strongest musical opinions that I hold. Megadeth has, by a pretty significant margin, the best catalog of the big four thrash bands. It's not even close, really. And it's one of those very few things, because I'm pretty open-minded, but it's one of those very few things that you'll just never sway me on. So let's break that down real quick. So Metallica, first off, is notably super inconsistent. I mean, depending on how you feel about Death Magnetic's production and whether or not it ruined that record, you could say comfortably that Metallica either went 17 years or 25 years without a great album. So that's a fucking quarter century right there. Then on the flip side, you have Slayer, who are arguably too consistent, with several records in their catalog being almost completely interchangeable. And Anthrax, to me, doesn't, in the first place, doesn't have the volume of classic albums to compete with Megadeth at all. But if we just follow this consistency thread that I'm on here, 1993 to 2011 is an 18-year gap with this much notable music from Anthrax. Pretty big gap. I know that We've Come For You All is kind of a fan favorite, but not really a significant record in the larger scene. So that leaves Megadeth, the last man standing here. It's almost 4 decades now, only 3 bad albums, 4 classic albums, and at least 2 modern classics, which is another important point when we're talking about the longevity of these bands. It's just such a consistently strong body of work. And you know, what's funny is I've been listening to this band for so long now, but I still had, like, combing through this entire catalog, I still had new takeaways. Like, here are a few quick takeaways from all the re-listening here. Number 1, Countdown to Extinction is a top 3 Megadeth album. Number 2, the album 13 is underrated. Like, I think a lot of us ignore that album just because it came right after Endgame. And then finally, this is a little bit controversial, but Super Collider, it's not nearly as bad as I remember. I think we all wrote it off very quickly. I, for one, hadn't listened to these songs more than twice. So it's fun after all these years to still see my opinions kind of changing and evolving on music, some of which I've heard hundreds of times. So anyway, with all of that out of the way, the 10 best Megadeth deep cuts. This was quite an undertaking. This was fucking, it's 10 songs, that's it. This was a lot easier when I was doing it for a band like Avenged Sevenfold, who have, what, 7 albums, 8 albums, something like that. A very important thing here from the jump always is the specific definition of what a deep cut is. So, for these videos at least, it's no singles, no music videos, no live staples, and then this is where it gets a little murky and there's some gray area. No fan favorites. So a fan favorite, what is that? It's a song that's slightly under the popularity of a big single, but it's the one that, like, just people remember albums by. So by that criteria, we have to exclude songs like Tornado of Souls. We have to exclude Foreclosure of a Dream off of Countdown to Extinction. So that is where these lists get a little bit tricky. I hope, for the sake of all the hardcore Megadeth fans watching, that I was sufficiently restrictive here. I think maybe 1 or 2 of these is up for debate. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this list. As always, please post your top 10 in the comments. I'm really curious to see what people think, especially because this is a pretty vast catalog. And also, if you're watching this and you're trying to get into Megadeth and haven't, I mean, this is like a 10-song, 40-minute playlist that I'm basically talking about here. It's a good way to start, so let's get into it. Number 10 is I Thought I Knew It All from Euthanasia. For me, there are a bunch of very eligible high points on Euthanasia. In fact, I think the original long cut of this list had like 5 different tracks from this album, but specifically this song just embodies everything great about the album. Like, for a band that had already proven themselves when it came to these long, winding, super technical songs, it was almost at that point more impressive for them to take their music and shrink it down to these bite-sized little mid-tempo pieces. And if Countdown to Extinction proved they could do that, Euthanasia took that and then married it with Dave Mustaine really singing. You have those 2 elements, and then you fill in the gaps with lead guitar, and you get Euthanasia. And I Thought I Knew It All has all those elements. It's got the quick little riff that's simple and catchy but still packs a punch. It's got the crooning vocal melodies. It's got the tasteful lead guitar lines coloring in the rest, particularly in the chorus. Those harmonies are really awesome. And yeah, Euthanasia is not only one of Megadeth's most underrated albums, but it's got this combination of the simplest but also most tasteful guitar work. How the Story Ends from Endgame. I remember very clearly Chris Broderick, who at the time was a a very significant change for fans as the band's new lead guitarist. You know, this a little more shreddy guy who came in and sort of upped the ante from a technical perspective from what Glenn Drover was doing on the previous record. I remember in an interview he said that this was his favorite solo that he did on the record, and for good reason. His solo on here fucking rips. But honestly, that solo is just the icing on the cake for a song that otherwise has pretty much everything in place that you want for modern Megadeth. There's this chunky main riff in this song which showcases what, to me, to this day, is the strongest rhythm guitar tone on any Megadeth record on Endgame. There is a big layered chorus with a massive hook. There's a little acoustic guitar interlude thrown in for some color. And then after the solo section, there's this crushing breakdown that kind of sneaks up on you and really catches you off guard. It's just the entire package from modern Megadeth. And they were a band who couldn't miss on this record, but this track in particular was always a real sleeper for me. From Killing Is My Business, the album that started it all, Chosen Ones is a banger. I think of all the Big Four debuts, Megadeth's energy was the most frantic and the most off the wall out of the gate. I mean, the rhythm guitars on this song are basically like shredding leads at points, and many people have commented on that. There's a little bit of odd time thrown into this song, and then really in particular, the main riff on here is the catchiest on the whole album, besides, of course, the iconic title track. And it's not only the songwriting here, but Chosen Ones showcases how the sound of this record is so bright. And the kick drums, especially with the double bass groove like in this song, as well as Ellison's bass tone, really pop. And this is Megadeth firing on all cylinders early on, and this shows how they really were a great band from the start, which you can't exactly say about all your favorites. The song Vortex from Cryptic Writings has always been a favorite of mine. It's funny because I love this particular album for its alt-metal immersion. They really took a big leap here that mostly paid off artistically, but Vortex specifically doesn't fit the record at all. I mean, if you break the song down, you have Tornado of Souls Part 2 is the riff, essentially. You have shredding solos, you have a pretty hard-hitting breakdown, and then the outro to the song is pretty complicated and rhythmically awkward. So, in essence, this is a classic Megadeth song buried within what is otherwise a very different album for them. Tears in a Vial is a fantastic song from The System Has Failed, which is a record that, contextually speaking, directly followed the near total destruction of the band, so that resulted in the most personal lyrics of Dave's career. And to me, Tears in the Vial is the #1 example of that. You have these very interesting lyrics about walking away from something you love, which we assume is the band and this career you've built, for something you love even more, which is your family. That's the most common interpretation here. But then in the final verse, you have Dave personifying Megadeth and this industry success as this hot and vapid chick, basically. It's really well written. And that's not even touching on the gorgeous harmonized solo in the middle of the song, the riffing. It's a high point on an album full of high points, which is especially impressive when you think about this album coming directly after the two worst albums of this band's career. I don't think Dave Mustaine himself would argue that this was the second wind that Megadeth is still riding to this day. Cracking the top 5 is Never Dead from their 2011 album 13, which is a record that I mentioned at the top of this video. I very quickly realized, re-listening to it, just how underrated it is. And Never Dead in particular has the distinction of being the most blistering track of this era of the band. It really is a relentless, full throttle assault with a big chorus and an appropriately simmering extended intro that really does justify its length by just how much this track blows your head off when it does kick in. It's just such a ripping deep cut from this album. Bodies is our second Endgame entry here, and what cracks me up about Bodies is you have this genius Mustaine songwriting tactic where you just make half of a song an epic fucking guitar solo, and assuming that your listeners are into that, which of course we are, now you only have to write 100 seconds of a good song. That's it. That's what this song is. And so ironically, it trims the fat to add guitar solos. Like we think of Hangar 18 as this long and complicated song, and sure it is, but if you sift out all the guitar solos, that song is pretty succinct and pretty to the point. And with Bodies, you have this excellent 1-2 punch here, where you have Act 1, which is a very catchy song with instantly memorable lyrics. You have a real Mustaineism on here when he says, "They all have been good friends, just not good friends of mine." You know, you have that. And then Act 2, you have this big, grand guitar solo that just appears out of nowhere, sweeps the song up, and just carries it all the way home. And like I said, I think that's exceptional songwriting. I don't think it's lazy at all. I think it ensures that the song doesn't overstay its welcome. It just goes by so quickly, much like life in the opening line, and it just packs so much in, though. So I mentioned my love for Countdown to Extinction, which is undoubtedly Megadeth's commercial peak. And I think that Architecture of Aggression is such an important piece of that track list. Like, when you look at how perfectly sequenced the album is, and that Murderer's Row of 7 tracks up front in particular, you realize very quickly that Architecture of Aggression is the linchpin, like the piece right in the middle that's just holding everything together, because it follows a massive hit like Symphony of Destruction, and then after it is like a half ballad and a fan favorite, which is Foreclosure of a Dream. So if that song right there was weak, really the infrastructure of the album would not be the same. And Architecture of Aggression really holds its own, sandwiched between all these classic fucking Megadeth songs. It's a song that really makes use of that gritty Countdown to Extinction rhythm guitar tone, and delivers what is for Megadeth an uncharacteristically brute force headbanger of a riff. It's not the type of riff that you hear a lot in Megadeth's music, but they execute it perfectly. And then the lyrics, the lyrics on here go so hard. These are my favorite Megadeth lyrics across their whole career. I mean, I could quote the whole thing, but there's that one line in the chorus: "Great nations built from the bones of the dead with mud and straw." Just that imperialistic visual is so fucking powerful. And you know, there's a lot of ways to interpret the song, but I love the concept of the physical infrastructure of a conquered nation being enforced by aggression. Like, it exists there. Whatever is there exists solely because of man-on-man aggression. It gives you a lot to think about. And yeah, Mustaine will never get the credit he deserves as a lyricist. He writes some great lyrics. So I think I've behaved myself so far in terms of making sure these really are deep cuts, but these last 2 picks I think are going to be debatable, and I'm sure I'll hear from you guys in the comments. So my number 2 pick is Back in the Day from System Has Failed, which there was a video shot for it, but it did not come out. So that's my technicality. It's an incredible song. I mean, what can you say? Much like Tears in a Vial, it is a nakedly autobiographical song. It tells the wistful and nostalgic tale of the metal scene that Mustaine came up in, while still retaining that bitterness and that snarl that only he can do. This song is perfect from front to back, it really is, but it's that bridge section which takes over the song halfway through, which makes it a top pick for me. I mean, that section, it sounds like nothing that Megadeth had done before or has done since. It's dramatic, it's epic, it tosses in these tremolo guitars for good measure. It climaxes also so effortlessly into that abrupt ending of the song. I mean, look, old Megadeth, new Megadeth, a lot of times I say there is very, very little difference in quality between the two, and Back in the Day is one of many strong pieces of evidence I have on my side. And finally, Lucretia. This track is just nestled in there, right past the halfway point of one of the greatest metal albums ever written, so therefore it doesn't get nearly enough praise. I actually covered the Marty Friedman solo on this channel years ago. The guitar work in general on this song, from that bright and quirky intro to those slamming grooves to the solos, is fucking excellent. But my argument, and because you know, you might think, okay, no track on Rust in Peace is a deep cut. But here's my argument. Much like Architecture of Aggression, Lucretia is the connective tissue which holds the sequential track list together. I really don't think the album flows without the song, because you have that mid-album slight dip, slight little interlude with Five Magics into Poison Was a Cure. And then Lucretia connects, it's kind of the bridge to Tornado of Souls, which is, you know, inarguably the late peak of the album. And then, of course, we sail off to the sunset with the excellent title track. But without Lucretia, does the album flow as well? Probably not. So again, sequencing-wise, this song serves its purpose on the album beautifully, but when we take the song just on an individual level, which, by the way, I believe this is Ellefson's only co-writing credit on the record, I think that's correct, it's from the lead guitars to the rhythm guitars to that classic Mustaine trick I mentioned, where you write 2 minutes of a song and let the guitars kind of carry it. It's the best. Alright, I really appreciate you guys watching and hearing me out. Again, please leave your top 10 list in that comment section. I mean, with a catalog as expansive as Megadeth's, I can't imagine any 2 lists are even remotely similar, so I look forward to both the diversity of lists and the arguments for them. And as always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, as well as checking out any of the other rock or metal-related content that I publish on this channel. Really appreciate you guys watching, liking, disliking, just engaging in any fashion. Twitter, Instagram handle is @RyanPandaMusic. Again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you soon.